Hey everyone, it's me, the Skeptical Skeptic, back with another video. Just kind of a long, short rant. So I just have a question for everyone watching this video right now. So, does anyone else hate ELA class, aka also known as the English Language Arts? Well, I do. Well, because you see, I wasn't a big fan of a lot of my high school experience, as I'm sure is the case with a lot of people who are in high school, but I'm still a person who holds education to be of very high importance. So in most classes, I generally try to get as much out of them as I could, so that I could, know stuff. But, I've always been very partial to the sciences, which were definitely the most interesting for me to study in high school, except for physics class, which I hated. And I also enjoyed social studies, like American government and politics. Math is not particularly interesting to me, but I am at least good at it, and I felt like I was actually learning stuff in class. And I tried to take what I could from a host of other classes, like economics, computer science, health, music, theology, and you know what, even though I have absolutely no affinity for learning new languages, even Spanish class kind of felt useful, as now I'm at least able to write and read basic Spanish, even though I can't speak it at all. But truly the most useless class of all, relative to the enormous amount of time that was focused on it, was ELA class. Well, now I know what you're thinking. Now, why was this class so bad anyway? Well, aside from the fact that you were learning how to speak English in it, which nearly everyone who grows up in the United States already knows how to do, it's because there was just so much useless filler in the class. Like, to be perfectly honest, I'm not one of those people who just hates reading books. I mean, I certainly did when I was younger, and even now I definitely prefer non-fiction books and visual mediums like movies and TV or fiction books. However, I can still get through a book fine, and although usually it takes a while because of how much you have to read. I have legitimately enjoyed quite a few books in the ELA class, like for example The Crucible, Kite Runner, To Kill a Mockingbird, and A Raisin in the Sun are all pretty good, in my opinion. And before you say it, I know that two of those are plays and not books, but I don't really care, because watching plays is boring as heck to me, and I just prefer to read them instead. But anyway, getting back to the topic, I would not have as much of a problem if ELA class were actually focused on reading a bunch of books and then giving thematic breakdowns / reviews of them. In fact, the times where that happened in ELA class were where I was most invested, but unfortunately that's not what ELA class was about for me in high school. No, you see, in ELA class I spent hours and hours studying poems. Friggin' poems! Now, in my humble opinion, poems are terrible and stupid garbage, and I don't understand them, and I feel like they have absolutely no substance. There's no story. Most of them are like half a page long. So let me ask you something. Why did we spend entire days in ELA class trying to analyze a poem and its meaning? I mean, seriously, a poem in class might take 2 minutes to read, but then we have like an hour or more to do assignments on said poem, and it's ridiculous. Poems are not art. They are terrible and useless, and it is shameful that we spend so much time reading them in class. Oh my gosh. But you see, that is not all, because nearly as bad as poems were the short stories. See, honestly, I think I just really have a problem with, things that are too short. Like, a book that's 100 pages or more long can craft an interesting and compelling narrative with developed characters, but short stories and poems can't do that. So, after I read them, I just can't help but come away with the empty feeling of, why did I just read that? Like, what was the point? And there is, of course, the problem, yet again, of the fact that much more time was spent doing assignments on the short stories than actually reading them. But if you think that this was the extent of filler in ELA class, ha 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 ha!
Well, the opposite is true.
It was not the extent of filler in ELA class, because you see, in-class reading was also incredibly tedious. In order to pad for time in class so that the teacher could make the class believe that ELA class, I just said class 3 times, was actually worth something and necessary, for nearly every book and play that we did end up studying, the teachers had the students read the book aloud in class all the way through. Now, what's so bad about that, you may ask? Well, the answer is everything! When I read something, I like to be in a calm, quiet environment by myself, and not listening to a bunch of teenagers trying to sputter and blurt out words that they don't understand, and I feel the need to correct them for constantly. Listening to someone try to read in class was much less interesting and much less efficient than me just trying to read something myself. And it certainly didn't help that the teacher was constantly interrupting to try to explain aspects of the story, and there were also constant pauses as one student passed the mantle of reader onto another student. Every single paragraph just dragged out the process to the nth degree, meaning it would take literal weeks to get through a story in class that I could have easily read myself in a weekend. The only interesting part of in-class reading was one particular year where one particular student could pull off a smooth, fake Southern accent that would melt the hearts of men and women alike, okay? But then, of course, there were also the movies, where apparently it was not enough to read our stories in class. We also had to watch the movie adaptations in class, too, for whatever reason, except we pretty much never finished watching them and just stopped halfway through, which just instigated my OCD to no end. It also begs the question, why did we even start watching them in the first place? It's a complete waste of time, and we don't even get to finish. But, you see, if you think I am done complaining about ELA class yet,
Well, the opposite is true.
I am not done complaining about ELA class yet, because there was also the vocabulary, the grammar, and the freaking citations. So in regards to the vocabulary, every time we started a new subject in class, we were given a bunch of vocabulary that we had to look up the definitions of and write out and then take a quiz on them. I mean, I guess that didn't take up too much time, but it just felt really useless. Most of the words we were never going to use in any meaningful way in our lives. And really, I mean, if a student doesn't understand a word that they see, they can just get context in the book that they're reading it in, or look it up on their own time. But there are also the dreaded grammar lessons. Seriously, what was so terrible about the grammar lessons was that we were barely ever even quizzed on grammar, so it just felt like something that was useless to learn, and it was at the same time taking up time, and a complete waste of time, because in no way were there ever any comprehensive studies done about the English language, like there would have been like studying for the SATs or something. So we just worked on some boring packets periodically with no rhyme or reason. So yeah, it was basically just busy work in class. Then we also sometimes worked on spelling and punctuation and the difference between freaking similes and metaphors, and it all reeked of horrible filler meant to fill out class time so we had something to do. It never felt like anything important or worthwhile. And then there was the citations. I hate citations. I hate them. I mean, seriously, there have been times where, like, I'm working on a research paper, and then I finish, and I'm pretty proud of myself for working hard on it, but then I have to finish the citations, and it takes like 3 or 4 more hours. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with citing sources. Obviously, you should say where you got your ideas and information from in writing, but I do have a problem with the fact that you have to gather every single piece of information there is about a source, including the website link, the title, the location, the publisher, the author, the date of publishing, the date of viewing, the platform it was published on. When, really, do you actually need all of that? I mean, for real, you could just put the link and title of the article, and someone could easily check it out themselves. And of course, you also have to neatly organize all the information about the source in MLA in a particular way with the punctuations and indents and different orders for different sources, and the tedious effort of putting in text citations in every single sentence in your research paper that was crafted using information that you researched, including an entire page of new in-text citations adding on to the original research paper. It's so pretentious. I don't understand why citations are so freaking complicated. And of course, because they are so needlessly complicated, we have to spend multiple class periods of time studying them. Oh my gosh, it was torture! It was torture! And you know what I think the worst part about ELA class was? It's that part of ELA class was also supposed to be history, and learning about the historical time periods throughout the ages by reading literature throughout those time periods. But that never really happened because of all the incredibly large amount of filler in class. We only gained a barely basic surface level of understanding about historical time periods that we were trying to study, other than in the cases where it was my assignment to do actual research on it myself. The textbooks for each year was hundreds of pages of long, with so many different entries, and yet less than 100 pages were even touched on most years. And in the wide world of so much literature in the world that we could have studied and read in ELA class, the amount of useless filler that was focused on made it so that only 6 or so major stories were read each year. A lot of them weren't even that great and were not even important or timely in any way. For crying out loud, we didn't even read any books of the Bible in class in a Catholic school and barely even touched on any religious texts. Believe me when I say that ELA class in high school was, without a doubt, one of the worst and most useless classes I ever took, and honestly, if I have to go through the same thing again in college, man, that is going to be a waste of my time, and I'm gonna... But you see, if you do not believe me when I say to you that ELA class was mostly useless and full of filler, then it is time for me to present you with some solid proof of my claim. So I don't know if anyone's noticed, it's not like it's really been a major news story or anything, but the entire world has been eclipsed by a deadly pandemic, and because of that, schools in the USA have closed down, meaning I did not get to finish my senior year of Catholic high school in the classroom. So that meant that I didn't get the opportunity to learn that condoms are evil in person, but more importantly, it meant that I was not going to ELA class, and the workload had been moved online. Now I want you all to take a guess on how many online assignments I received from my ELA teacher over a nearly 3-month period. Alright, did you guess? Do you have the possible number of assignments inside your brain? Yeah, the correct answer is only 3. Only 3 assignments over nearly 3 months. A research paper, a series of journal entries, and then another research paper. Can I just say that that is pathetic? I was doing work for nearly every other class I had, nearly every weekday, and I was actually learning things for the most part, but in ELA class, the digital workload was a complete joke. Weeks of nothing getting updated at all. And that is because when you take a class that is mostly just useless assignments that don't amount to anything significant about grammar and punctuation and citation and vocabulary and poems and a bunch of useless busy work, and going at a snail's pace trying to get slacker kids to read a book, and then strip it down of all of that and just leave the bare essentials, there is almost nothing of value gained over a class taught every single school day over the course of 4 whole years. I would much rather have just been given some suggested reading books and turned in some reviews and analyses of them every year and some research papers. I didn't need to take 4 whole years of a useless subject where coming into the classroom was actively detrimental since it took time away from reading by myself. In summary, ELA, aka also known as English Language Arts, was terrible. I hated it, complete waste of time. And the program seriously needs to be changed dramatically to cut out so much useless time wasting and busy work that is to make it so that it's actually interesting, informative, challenging, and engaging for students, and not a complete waste of time. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, rant over. This has been the Skeptical Skeptic. I'm gonna head out, and bye.